Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have John Phillips, co-founder of Predictit, the stock market for politics. John, it's great to see you as always. We have a number of things to get through, and I want to kick it off with the Pennsylvania Republican Senate primary. I guess it's a little bit flippant to say, but to no one's surprise, considering the circus it was leading up into the voting, that they don't know who potentially the winner is.
Jill, are you watching this thing in Pennsylvania? It's so interesting, right? So the traders now are betting on, will this margin hold? And they think that Oz is going to take it in the end. They've got him at 90 cents or 90% odds. McCormick's at under 10% odds. But if I were interested in long shot, if I had a long shot bias, which by the way I do, boy, an opportunity to get 10 times your money by betting on McCormick to triumph on this sure seems tempting. But the traders, I can't question the wisdom of my customers. These traders are saying it's 90% odds that Oz is going to be declared the winner in the Republican Senate nomination in Pennsylvania.
And John, before we get to what's happening in Georgia here, I just want to follow up on what we're seeing with the primary in Pennsylvania. What happens if they can't arrive to a definitive decision? Do they do a recount? Do they redo the election? How does that work?
Oh yeah, there's going to be, I mean, if it's within a certain margin, there's going to be a recount. It's automatic. And there will be a recount in Pennsylvania to be sure. But right now, the question really is 1,000 votes separates Oz from McCormick. There was a court ruling having to do with dated ballots that would appear to favor McCormick a bit, but not necessarily enough. He's got, 1,000 votes is not nothing. And all these votes are going to get counted. There's no declaring victory and moving on. It's going to be contested. It's going to be litigated. And you just fasten your seatbelt, Joe.
Yeah, well, speaking of fastening our seatbelts, let's turn to Georgia for a moment here.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is literally a grudge match.
It is. It is. So there's another one coming up that we're going to talk about at the end of this segment. But boy, oh boy, in Georgia, it's Kemp is clearly favored to win this, and not too many people. I don't think even David Perdue, his opponent, thinks that he's going to win. Now, Perdue's only hope at this point is that he makes it into a runoff by denying Perdue 50% or more of the votes. But that is probably not going to happen, at least according to Predictit traders who ascribe at less than 10% odds to there being a runoff. So Kemp seems to have a lock on this. It's 96% odds that Kemp's going to be the winner. Now, what's really interesting about this also, Jill, is that if Kemp does win and then goes on to beat Stacey Abrams in the fall in the Georgia general election, he's going to be one of the candidates that he not only, did it without Trump's help, but he's also going to be considered one of the first tier competitors for the Republican nomination in 2024. So keep an eye on this race. It's got implications way beyond Georgia. But of course, what happens in the Georgia gubernatorial race is very important in and of itself.
Right. And of course, we have the Republican Secretary of State nomination coming up there as well. It feels as if every election, it's really highly not polarized or contested, but there just seems to be a lot of drama around all of these.
There is, because there is a lot of drama, right? And Raffensperger, if there's anybody probably that Trump hates, I don't know of anybody he probably hates more than Raffensperger. Raffensperger, of course, vocally and repeatedly and very aggressively pushed back on what the former president, was encouraging in the case of the Georgia vote. So, Raffensperger he's not a lock, though. I mean, he's running against Congressperson Heiss. It could go, it's right now 54-46 odds for Raffensperger to win that race.
Yeah. And if we move along to Texas here, the Democrats also a fiercely contested race that they're contending with.
Oh, yeah. So down in Texas 28, grudge match. So this is really payback. There were two races on Tuesday, and one in Pennsylvania. which was a congressional seat where the progressive beat the more moderate candidate. The second is in Oregon, where the more moderate Democratic incumbent looks like he's going to lose to a more progressive candidate, there aren't too many of these moderate Democrats left, so this is one of them, and it looks like Schrader is going to go down. And then the third one is what we're talking about, Texas 28. Boy, Cuellar, he narrowly missed the opportunity to win in the first round back in March against Jessica Cisneros, who's the more progressive candidate. And now he's fighting for his life. He's at 42% odds on Predictit. Cisneros is at 59% odds, according to Predictit. So it looks like Cuellar is going to lose.
Yeah. John, it's so interesting. You and I have spoken about this a number of times, and you had mentioned to me, typically when people go to the polls, the way Americans think tend to be more center, tend to be more moderate, but the trends I've been noticing covering each week with you and Ethan on Predictit is we're seeing either more progressive or more conservative candidates winning. And typically it's been, okay, we have this outlier, minority voices that are really making the most noise, but they seem to be the ones winning the primaries.
It's the nature of the political landscape now, which is the polar opposites. So the further right, further left candidates, they really are the ones who turn out in the primaries because they care the most. And then there's a group of voters who will turn out for a general election consistently, and then there are the swing voters and these infrequent voters, I should say. And these infrequent voters are people who, if they are Democrats, the great fear that Democrats have is that these infrequent voters who are reliably Democrat when they vote are just not going to come out to vote. Inflation and the other factors, they're so discouraged, and on the other side you've got issues that equally motivate Republicans, either buying into Trump's grievances, or the abortion issue, or some of the other issues, and it's a question as to whether they're going to be motivated to vote, and they do make their voices heard in the primaries.
Yeah, well, I mean, if not enough voters get out during the primaries, they're not going to have center enough candidate when it comes time to national elections or state elections. So that's a great point that you make. I think us as voters need to take that with more than a grain of salt. That's for sure. Yeah. All right, John, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.